So today I am going to Chernobyl. For those that don't know, Chernobyl is located in Ukraine. It's about 2 hours from Kiev, which I'm at now. And if you don't know anything about Chernobyl, they had this nuclear explosion in near a town called Pripyat, and it destroyed many lives, some of them immediately because they had such bad radiation exposure. And so they had to evacuate the entire town of Pripyat and Chernobyl, obviously. And it's been abandoned since for 30 years now. It happened in April 1986. And I've been wanting to visit for years. And finally this year I decided to go. And then right when I booked my ticket to Kiev and to go to Chernobyl, the HBO series came out. And it's a great TV show about Chernobyl. It gives lots of great facts about it. It's pretty true to the story. There's some dramatics, obviously, because, it's an HBO show. But most of it is true. All of that are facts. People are still affected by the radiation because radiation is a slow process of what will happen to your body. Things there are still highly radioactive. There are some obviously you can't go to the red zones, is what they call it. And I don't know exactly where we're going or where we're allowed to explore. It's going to be a super powerful sight to see. I'm very excited to go explore, and I gotta get going. The only way to visit Chernobyl is with a tour guide. There are many Chernobyl tours, and I decided to go with Solo East Travel since they have been doing this for years and have 5-star reviews. It's a 2-hour bus ride to Chernobyl, and on the way, we watched a documentary about the catastrophic event. About 30 minutes into the ride, we stopped by a convenience store to use the restroom and buy some snacks and drinks. This was our only convenience store stop, so if you didn't eat breakfast, you should probably get something here. After 2 hours on the bus, we reached the Chernobyl Checkpoint, Pripyat. Entrance into Chernobyl is strictly regulated, and it took about 30 minutes for our tour guide, Tanya, to check us in and get us the necessary papers. We then got off the bus, used the restrooms, and got in line to get our dosimeters, which recorded our radiation dose while visiting Chernobyl. Our first stop was one of the abandoned villages within the 30-kilometer zone. I rented a Geiger counter to see how much radiation was actually around me. It started at around 0.16 microsieverts, and that's considered pretty normal. It's impossible to have zero because there is always some form of natural radiation. In comparison, London measures at 0.108. We walked by a couple of abandoned buildings and stopped in front of a building that used to be a grocery store. We were allowed to go inside this one and explore a bit. There was glass everywhere, so that's one of the reasons why they tell everyone to wear thick, closed-toe shoes. We moved on and stopped by the Palace of Culture, which was basically a town hall. Next, we explored a couple of abandoned houses with an old Soviet car out front. Tanya told us we can go inside the car and take pictures with it, but I think we were all afraid to do that. I mean, I know I was. Our Geiger counter didn't go off, but it's better to be safe than sorry. You just never know. Exploring the inside of these houses was when it got a little emotional for me. It was sad to see little remnants left behind like books, music notes, and old newspaper articles. Most of the big items from these abandoned buildings are gone because the looters took them all. Next, we headed to Chernobyl Town for lunch. We made a quick stop at the memorial complex where we saw a tall sculpture and a row of signs with names. At first, we all thought they were names of lives lost, but it's actually the names of the Chernobyl villages that were lost. A lot of them were so contaminated that they had to be buried underground. Okay, so I am in Chernobyl Center Town. People actually live here, and they have like a little supermarket. There's dormitories that they say. There's also a couple hostels here. We just ate at a cafe. We had some lovely lunch. It was actually really good. It was pork and rice and a little bit of a sweet bread. So far we're in the 30-kilometer zone of Chernobyl, where they say it's not too bad. The radiation level is actually okay, especially compared to other places, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, so now we are taking a little break and then moving on to the 10-kilometer zone of Chernobyl, where it's more radioactive, so we have to be more careful about not touching anything. Actually, the first place we went to, our tour guide was saying that we could actually touch things, but I think everybody was still afraid of not touching anything. I mean, I wasn't touching anything, but she said it was totally fine. So yeah, those over there are dormitories, and over there she was saying about 3,000 people still live in Chernobyl. They work here. I mean, there's a cafe here, so they make food. So there's some stray dogs around, and they have vet volunteers that come and give them shots so they don't get rabies and they could stay healthy. And then once they're sterilized, then they tag them. Where are they going? After our little break, we moved on to the 10-kilometer zone, and Tanya showed us the first hotspot. These are little spots that are highly radioactive, and she showed us on her Geiger counter how the levels went up drastically and the device started beeping. I tested it out for myself.
For this one, for summertime, high season, we have 10, 11, 12.
Getting lower.
Barely had a chance of measuring the hotspot. It was almost impossible to measure it even. While here next.
We had some time in this area to explore in an abandoned nursery where there were toys, children's books, and paper crafts left behind. As I was walking down the hall and turned the corner into one of the rooms full of beds, I gasped a little because this was the room I saw often online, with pictures of the creepy dolls. The children would take their daytime naps here. We got back on the bus and headed towards the nuclear power plants. We drove past a huge cooling tower that was being built for additional reactors. We also saw reactor number 5, which was supposed to be completed in November 1986, 6 months after reactor number 4's explosion. The cranes and machinery were left as is, and Tanya told us that one of the cranes just recently crumbled to pieces. We then drove up to the infamous reactor number 4, and it was surreal to see this thing so up close. It's now covered by a giant sarcophagus to limit the radioactive contamination. I pulled out the Geiger counter to see what the levels were like, and it only went up to 1.19. We moved on to Pripyat, a city established in 1970 to house the employees of Chernobyl. We hopped off the bus for a few minutes at the Pripyat sign, and this area seemed to set off my Geiger counter more than the previous areas we visited. It went up to 5 microsieverts when I pointed it towards an open field. When we got back on the bus, we drove by the Red Forest, which is one of the most contaminated areas in the world today, and Tanya put her Geiger counter up against the window. It started beeping, and the numbers kept on going up all the way up to 30. Our first stop in Pripyat was near an old apartment building. Tanya showed us pictures of what it was once like. It's hard to believe that this was once a thriving city with 50,000 people living here. We walked by hotels, restaurants, and then stopped by a supermarket. Having a supermarket in the 1980s in the Soviet Union was super rare since everything used to be rationed. Our next stop was the iconic Ferris wheel of the city. Interesting fact I learned from Tanya was that this little amusement park was never used. It was built to celebrate May Day, an annual Ukrainian national holiday, and was supposed to open to the public a few days after the explosion. Tanya showed us another hot spot underneath one of the cabins of this Ferris wheel.
Particles just right exactly on the part itself. It's mainly not on the surface from the bottom, it's inside, in between the metal core and the...
Next, we moved on to the city's fitness center. I was actually surprised we were allowed in here because we had to go upstairs to see the basketball court and pool area. I was a little scared going up and down those stairs. I can't imagine they'll let all these tourists in here for much longer for safety reasons. On our final stop in Pripyat, we explored an abandoned school. Seeing hundreds of children's gas masks on the floor was chilling. School desks still remained lined up, and some textbooks were left open on the desks. I'm guessing the textbooks were thrown on there by some tourists to get a good photograph. We walked around Pripyat for about an hour, but it seemed like 15 minutes to me. I could have spent hours here exploring everything. Before we headed back to Kiev, we made one last stop at the Duga, also known as the Russian Woodpecker. Duga was a Soviet radar system, used as a missile defense and operated from 1976 to 1989. The Duga is enormous, standing at 85 meters tall and 210 meters wide. It was nicknamed the Russian Woodpecker because their random frequency would disrupt radio operations all over the world with a sharp, repetitive tapping noise. So now we're going to head back to the bus, and we have to scan our bodies, make sure that we're not radioactive, give back our gasometers back, and measure that, make sure that we're all good and safe. We're okay here. It's 0.27. So earlier when we started, it was 0.13. Right now it's 0.27, so it's not bad. Pripyat was definitely interesting, especially after seeing the HBO show, seeing certain things like the pool or the gymnasium, seeing the elementary school, a nursery. It's creepy, yet fascinating, yet, you think about how people used to actually live there and had a life there. I mean, there are 50,000 people there, and they said the average age was 27 years old, super young, and it was a city that everybody wanted to live in. During communism time, it's like they had a supermarket, which was rare, so they were calling it, the city of the future. And then that nuclear explosion happened. Really enjoyed the tour. It was very informative. I loved our tour guide. Solo Ease Travel was great, so if you're looking for who to travel with, they're a great option. And it's a whole day. It starts at 8 in the morning, and we're going back now. It's 4, And it takes a couple hours to get back, depending on traffic, but we still have to go through the checkpoint. So, yay for solo East travel.